frightening development this morning. A chemical weapon, nerve gas, was released inside a crowded subway system in Tokyo today.
The Japanese government says this wasn't the work of a lone madman, but an organized attack. Eyewitness reports suggest several people were involved in planting containers filled with poison gas at different underground stations. Some were disguised with masks, others wore sunglasses. But beyond that...
It was the late 1980s. Japan's economy was skyrocketing.
Japan has moved from feudal obscurity, totally closed to the outside world, to become the world's second most powerful economy.
And this economic boom seems to be going forever, bringing tremendous wealth to the Japanese.
The most consistently high growth rate in the world, huge trade surpluses, single-figure inflation, and just 2% unemployment.
But on the flip side of the coin, it also created an immense pressure on them. Pairing with long working hours and a highly competitive environment, people tend to focus more on material success. But as this became the norm, some began to question the meaning of their lives. Spirituality and religion emerged at this perfect timing as a place that could create inner peace for them. By that time, there were many different well-established new religions that people could choose to join.
心を変えていただく、そして体を変えていただく、ただいまではね、その心を変えていただきましょう。
ほぼ全員の信者が集まった本土、教祖に近い場所ほど年季の入った信者が座る。このオーラで体質が改善され、心も体も健康になるという。
私たちに関係なく先生からの力と私たちから出てくる霊とで波動があった時にそういう風に出てくるんです。
But right here, a brand new religion emerged and caught the crowd's eyes. People were intrigued, only to find out that despite this religion was actually created just 5 years ago back in 1985, it had managed to attract around 20,000 members already. This new religion was named Aum Shinrikyo, otherwise known as the Supreme Truth in English. Their network was not just limited to Japan, but they were everywhere.
Aum was believed to have around 10,000 members in Japan and up to 40,000 elsewhere, including the US, Australia, Germany and Russia.
As more and more people got to know Aum Shinrikyo, the question really became, who's behind it?
終焉の来ない世界、それを目指して修行すること、これが絶対的真理の宗教なので、煩悩を破壊することによってどの程度の瞑想修行を鐘の音、あるいは鐘の声、よしこれから頑張るぞ。朝原翔吾です。
And so we arrive at Shoko Asahara.
とりあえずいらっしゃるということで、ちょっと覗いてみましょうか。オウム真理教のですね、はい、孫子朝原翔子さん、今控室の方によろしくお願いします。
Well, I think to most Japanese people, perhaps TV shows were how they had learned about Shoko Asahara. On TV shows, Asahara was this friendly, down-to-earth individual, and that intrigued a lot of people, especially young adults.
朝原さんの好きな女優の人は誰ですか？
私秋吉久美子が好きだったんです。
People thought Asahara was special. Unlike other traditional religious groups, Asahara focused on something that people didn't expect. Yoga and meditation were the key selling points of Aum Shinrikyo. In this TV show, Asahara demonstrates to the host how doing yoga and meditation could improve their health and make their sins go away.
そして、左足を上げます。そして血液を頭に、下げたら、その後また足を戻して、そして今度はゆっくりとシャバーサナと言いまして、リラックスの体に入る。
And then the more impressive part follows.
彼女にエネルギーを入れると彼女はどうなるんですか？
彼女はもちろん超能力者にもなりますし、それから健康になりますね。
そうです。おお。
何ですか。すごい幸せな気持ちですごい満足感があってで肉体とこう自分の意識とか違うところにあった感じがして
すごいですね。
This girl, who had just received energy from Asahara, of course, was just one of the many Aum Shinrikyo members. The show eventually ended with a single sentence:
超能力はあなたを変える。
Supernatural abilities will change you. In the early 1990s, to ride the wave of the growing Japanese entertainment industry, Aum Shinrikyo launched its own animation studio to create a 10-episode anime to preach Asahara's ideology, named Choati Sakai. The anime kept emphasizing Asahara had this supernatural power to levitate and fly around different places for hours at a time.
私はなんと空中に留まっていたのだ。私自身この空中浮揚が単なる夢物語でなかったということを知ったのは7年半前のことであった。正しい修行によって身につく神通力とされていたからである。
And this became one of the catchiest selling points of Asahara.
信者は朝原の空中浮揚を信じて、朝原は神様以上の存在だと、全ての宇宙を知っている、輪廻転生全てを知っているというふうに思い込んでいるものですけど。
But when you look at these pictures of Asahara actually demonstrating his levitation power, it's clear that he's either jumping off the floor or the picture has been manipulated.
朝原教祖の浮いている写真が載っています。こういう写真が撮れるものかどうか、これから挑戦してみたいと思います。こういうものが全部トリックだとかデタラメだとかというつもりはないんですが、まるで超能力などない僕にでもですね、こういう写真は撮りうるのだという一つの証明になったんではないでしょうか。
There were more supernatural powers that Asahara would promote, which members could develop, like the ability to read minds, clairvoyant power, astral projection, healing abilities.
自分のその実力みたいなものがどういうものかよくわからない。そうするとやっぱり自分は特別な人間である。やっぱりこう何かの特別な能力を持ってるっていうふうに考えたい部分はかなりあるんじゃないか。
Well, it might sound a bit ridiculous to us in hindsight, but given the context of Japan's environment that people were in, using supernatural powers as a gimmick was interesting enough to make people want to learn about Aum Shinrikyo.
This promotional video promises to be the key to developing superpowers and the opening chapter of a wonderful life.
When I was at high school, I started believing that human beings have hidden powers and that we can develop these hidden powers.
In 1989, Aum Shinrikyo was recognized by the Tokyo Metropolitan Government as a legal religious group, a title that allowed it to avoid investigations into its activities. Little did the government realize how wrong this decision would turn out to be. Suzumi Sakamoto, he was a prominent lawyer who had denounced Aum Shinrikyo publicly. Throughout the years, he had expressed great concerns about Aum's beliefs, hoping the government could look into it.
そんな感じでどんどん被害者が増えて、もちろんサンデー毎日のね、報道を通じて、バッとまたたくさんいろんな形のですね。
One of Aum's beliefs that Sakamoto had his concern on was that Asahara believed that there were multiple levels of consciousness a person could reach. The higher level you had reached, the better you were, the more supernatural powers that you could unlock, in which of course Asahara claimed that he had the highest consciousness.
そして来世より高い世界に転生したいと考える人は証券会にまず重きを置き、いいね。
In the cult, members were persuaded to raise their consciousness for their goods. But what would they need to do?
修行するぞ、修行するぞ、修行するぞ、修行するぞ、修行するぞ。今の苦しみは原因である。この修行によって今の苦しみを打ち砕くことができる。
Survival training was a process which members would be subjected to all kinds of mental torture just to gain spiritual power.
Deprived of sleep and food and led through ordeals such as immersion in hot baths, some followers died.
よし、あんだ。はい。もう体力的にぞ。失敗したらまずいから。
心臓が止まっちゃう。
何怖がってるんだよ。
Some would take chemical drugs to remove so-called states of anxiety.
This Aum video shows members emerging after 6 days living underground. The loyal ones, on the other hand, were showered with praise.
第三次世界大戦がある場合、予言された私がキリストであるとするならば、逆にこの第三次世界大戦は私にとって、それからオウム真理教にとって飛躍の、つまりジャンプ台と何に違いない。
Doomsday prophecy was another belief that Sakamoto had his concerns on. Asahara believed that a global apocalypse was imminent. He often prophesied that this apocalypse would create a new world order and a great leap forward for Aum Shinrikyo, whether it's in the form of a new world or nuclear disaster.
おそらく都市の人口は10分の1ぐらいに激減するはずです。つまり今、例えば東京都の人口が1100万と言われていますが、これが約100万人ぐらいの都市になると。では残りの人たちはどうなるのか。それはみんな死んでしまうんだ。
But to survive this apocalypse, the only way was to follow his leadership and isolate themselves from the outside world. And for those who were trying to oppose them or try to leave the cult without permission, they would simply vanish. As Sakamoto began to pursue a class action lawsuit against Aum Shinrikyo, he and his entire family mysteriously vanished from their apartment in Yokohama, Japan's second largest city. At the very beginning, there were no clue about why they had disappeared, nor did anyone link their disappearance to Aum Shinrikyo. But in later years, police would soon discover that on November 3rd, 1989, just a few months after Aum Shinrikyo was recognized as a legal religious group, 4 senior cult members sneaked into Sakamoto's home and inject him, his wife, and a 14-month-old baby with potassium chloride, a lethal chemical that could cause cardiac arrest, eventually in all 3 of them. At this point, no one could stop Aum Shinrikyo from thriving.
オウム真理教は始まって今5年目の団体ですが、これからおそらく日本全土に広がっていく教団だと思います。
By the early to mid-1990s, pairing with their successful promotional campaign, the cult had grown to more than 20,000 members.
Recruiting at Japan's top universities, the Aum proved attractive to those disillusioned with an academic system which measures people by exam scores rather than individual ability.
私大学入学してなぜ辞めたかというと、大学入って実際大学の生活見て、こういう人たちが大人になって日本の社会って出来上がってるんだと。誰が何かやんなきゃいけないだろうと。誰かがこの社会を立て直すというか、理想的な社会を作り上げるような行動を起こさなきゃいけないだろうと。で、私が考えたのは、出家しなきゃいけないっていうことを考えたんですね。私は出家するんだと。
Now, when you look at the member list, one thing sticks out. They were very young. Not only were they young, but they were also accomplished professionals. I'm talking about engineers, doctors, chemists, biologists.
私は現代文明というものに危機感を持っていました。それで今現在の現代科学に加えて、そこにその精神性、つまり科学と宗教の融合というものに非常に興味がありましたので、そういった集団が団体があったならばそこに所属しようというふうに考えていました。もう完全に信頼しています。100%。
And this vast pool of talent create a perfect foundation for initiating a mass attack in the future. As their membership skyrocketed, the network was reaching $500 million, an all-time high. Soon after, they opened a new headquarters at the base of Mount Fuji.
This consisted of a ramshackle collection of buildings at the foot of Mount Fuji. It's surrounded by a high fence, which serves not just to keep curious visitors out, but also to keep Asahara's disciples in.
But this begs the question, where did their money come from?
特にこの現代のように物質に縛られた魂は、身体に縛られた魂は必ず地獄へ真っ逆さまに落ちるんだ。
Asahara would preach the message that materialism was evil and would make the soul of a person decay. To justify the belief that they had to reject a world polluted by materialism, members were forced to contribute a large portion of their income and hand over all the worldly possessions for safekeeping.
あなたはその2月いっぱいに出家をすると返事をしたんだから、これを書きなさいってこうして、それ見たらもうすごいんですよ。全部不動産とか車とかね、いろんなそういうものから、とにかく全部持ってるもの全部書き出すわけですよね。
From seminars and training courses focused on Asahara's teachings, they would charge a fee ranging from hundreds to tens of thousands of dollars.
Astonishingly, they were prepared to pay $2,000 a week for such a Spartan existence.
To bizarre religious items and services, you could receive spiritual power from another member with high spiritual level by touching his forehead, $500. Miracle Pond refers to a 7-ounce bottle of bath water comes from Asahara, which claimed to have creative powers, $2,000. Bottle's enlightenment refers to the injection of an unknown chemical to level up your spiritual power, $3,000. Rent an Aum Shinrikyo trademark headset to transfer Asahara Springs powers to you, $10,000. And this list could go on and on. But the point is, by using these methods, Aum Shinrikyo exploit a lot of money.
これからはより以上その強い政治に対する関心を持ちたいと思います。
In 1990, Asahara and 24 of his close disciples decided to run for the Japanese parliament election under their party, the Shinrikyo, also known as the Truth Party in English.
朝原将校です。私は5つの政策を訴えたいと思います。
Asahara believed that using their own style of campaign strategies and preaching their radical beliefs to the public, they could attract votes without doubt.
Their all-dancing, all-singing campaign became a familiar sight in Tokyo's streets.
If everybody joined Aum, then everybody would be saved, and they went around chanting songs of praise to Asahara.
私は十分に勝てると思いますね。で、できたら特等選を果たしたいと思っておりますけども。今回の選挙の結果ははっきり言って惨敗。
But ultimately, Asahara only received about 1,700 votes out of 500,000 cast. Adding to the humiliation, he didn't even secure all the votes from his own followers.
彼としてはやっぱりその大衆に直接自分が語りかければね、それはかなり評価が得られるはずだっていうふうに本気で信じてた節があるんですね。ところが選挙で開けてみたら全くの惨敗だと。
Although it's obvious that their campaign strategy turned the general public away, Asahara refused to accept this reality, and he went on blaming the Japanese government and broadcast a misleading message.
開票後の調査でははっきりしたことですけども、票の操作がなされていることは間違いないと思います。考えられることは大きなトリックがあった可能性はあると。よって国家、警察、マスコミ、これ全てこれからも敵に回っていくだろう。
But for now, Asahara's hatred towards the Japanese government grew even more than before. Since then, Aum Shinrikyo began to isolate themselves from mainstream society.
自分たちの中の世界を極度に神聖化するとともに外の世界を極度に邪悪なものとして考えてしまうっていう、それの落差がどんどんこうエスカレートしてきたんじゃないかっていう気がするんです。
Whilst their activities became increasingly dangerous and violent, their plan for a mass attack in Japan was now underway.
In Moscow, the hammer and sickle is lowered for the last time, and an era comes to an end.
With the Soviet Union collapse in 1991, many Russians were looking for spiritual comfort just like the Japanese, which made them more open to joining new religious movements. This provided Asahara with the perfect opportunity to expand his cult. In 1992, to recruit more members, Asahara and several cult members traveled to Moscow to open a new branch. By buying radio time from various Russian media outlets to broadcast the cult message, Aum Shinrikyo attracted hundreds of thousands of Russian citizens from all social levels to hear Asahara's teachings. Within just a few months, this new branch had added over 30,000 members to the cult.
As many as 30,000 joined, or 3 times the cult's Japanese membership.
Through charitable donations and hefty bribes, Asahara made contacts high in the Russian government. This includes various notable government officials, the Vice President of Russia, the Chairman of the Russian Parliament, the Chairman of the Russian Security Council. You see, connecting with these guys, this was the game changer.
Certainly, they were able to buy sessions like this, filmed near Vladivostok, playing with the deadly toys of a cash-strapped military. From Russia, the Aum smuggled home AK-47s to be used as models for their own weapons manufacture. This helicopter, bought second-hand for $1 million, was another Russian souvenir.
These powerful connections opened the doors for Asahara to provide the cult with military weapons, personnel, and training. Using the blueprints provided by Russian government, the cult manufactured around 1,000 AK, while about 200 members received military training. Although Aum Shinrikyo had access to abundant firearms provided by the Russian government, there was just one problem. Using firearms to carry out a mass attack in Japan downtown would be too apparent to avoid being tracked down, and mass-producing firearms would just be too complicated. Instead, they would need a weapon that could be unnoticeable yet feasible to be mass-produced. So, what could it be? On June 29, 1993, some residents living in Kameido noticed a bad smell in the neighborhood. As the smell persisted through the next day, residents made 41 complaints to the authorities to find out where the smell had come from. Upon investigation, it was found that the smell was coming from the building that Aum Shinrikyo rented. But what was weird about this building was that the windows were completely blacked out.
宗教のね、そういう団体でしょ。それがそういうなんか工場、あたかも工場のね、設備みたいなものがどんどん入るということが重なってね、余計やっぱり周りの人は不安に思って。
Whenever residents asked the cult members guarding the building what they were doing, they refused to give any information. And that's when people start to become a bit suspicious.
Over a period of months, residents collected 1,000 photographs documenting these plainly non-religious activities.
One of the main things that they noticed was that there were a lot of these barrels loaded on and on into the building. But at that point, people didn't know what was stored inside, nor did they have any convincing evidence linking Aum Shinrikyo to any wrongdoings. Only years later, it was revealed that what was actually stored inside were in fact various toxic chemicals, including anthrax, botulinum toxin, VX, taboon, and soman. All could potentially kill hundreds, if not thousands, if they were leaked accidentally. But this was exactly their intention. Chemicals were a perfect substitute for fire carrying out a mass attack. They were more unnoticeable and feasible to produce. Under the supervision of several senior scientist cult members, these chemicals were mass-produced and tested inside the building, and it was later revealed that the bad smell indeed came from a chemical named anthrax, which they had been testing on the roof of the building, with the intention to create an inhalational anthrax epidemic among the local residents. But because no one had been killed or injured, this case was significantly overlooked. Despite all the investigation conducted by the residents, Aum Shinrikyo went unchallenged by the authorities at the end. Then, one night,
Awoken at night by a stench of noxious fumes, protesting residents managed to flush out the guru in his Mercedes.
Although 118 more complaints were made, it took more than 2 weeks for the city inspectors to finally follow up. But by the time they broke into the building, the cult members, the chemicals, and equipment had already been long gone. Although the cult's first experiment had turned into a complete disaster, they quickly realized that testing the chemical weapons in downtown Japan was just too risky. To cover up their research, they switched to a quieter place to work, across the Pacific Ocean in West Australia.
They chose this remote sheep station which the sect bought near Leonora in Western Australia.
Aum Shinrikyo bought a remote 500,000 arc sheep station to continue the experiments. But whilst they were doing the experiments, they spotted another problem. But arguably, the reason why they were caught red-handed in Kameido was because the chemical they used spread out a bad smell, right? In other words, if they had wanted to avoid attention and carry out a mass attack secretly, they would need to have a new chemical substitute. And months later, in September 1993, they had it.
Sarin is made for only one purpose, and that is as a weapon.
They believed sarin was the best option. Sarin is an extremely dangerous weapon. In its pure form, it is 26 times more deadly than cyanide. It could suffocate, choke, and blind the victims when it's inhaled. But more importantly, it's colorless and odorless.
It is extremely effective in very small amounts.
It affects people by either breathing in, then breathing it in, or even penetration through the skin. So it's a very effective chemical warfare agent.
Between November 1993 and December 1994, the cult had invested tens of millions in building siren facilities. At Aum's headquarters at Mount Fuji, the cult spent $15 million to build a chemical plant that was capable of producing 70 tons of siren, an amount that could wipe out the entire population of Tokyo.
かつて村井元幹部はこの施設でこんな発言をしていた。
元信者の証言でですね、村井さんね、ナイフとか、銃器の部品などを作っているという話があるんですが、このあたりどうなんですか？
まず生活必需品、それから私たちのさまざまな立ち上げている機械類のその部品、その他を作っておりまして、そこまでの余裕はないです。
For now, with a new weapon locked in and more experience they have gained, Asahara and his cult were ready to carry out an attack again. In early 1994, Aum Shinrikyo purchased a piece of land with the intention to build a commune, but due to misinformation in a transaction with the landlord, they were sued to return the land. And with all three main judges ruling against them, they were expected to lose the court case. But as we now know, for those who attempted to oppose the cult, they were likely to be assassinated. These three judges were not an exception. On June 27, 1994, a few days before the verdict was announced, at 10:30 p.m., several senior members of Aum drove a refrigerated truck down to a small neighborhood in Matsumoto. The truck's cargo space was holding a heating contraption that had been specifically designed to turn 12 liters of liquid sarin into gas that could diffuse into the neighborhood. The plan was to release the sarin gas and let it flow towards a 3-story apartment building where the judges lived. But in the process of this targeted attack, everyone in the neighborhood who came in contact with the free floating sarin gas was affected. Soon after, at 11:30 p.m., the Matsumoto police received an urgent report from residents witnessing a fog with a pungent and irritating smell floating by. But when the police arrived, the situation had already gotten out of hand. In total, 5 dead residents were discovered in their apartments and 2 died in the hospital immediately after the admission. A total of 274 people was hospitalized following the attack. But surprisingly, the police investigation didn't lead to Aum Shinrikyo. Instead, they considered a 44-year-old man who went by the name of Yoshiyuki Kuno as the prime suspect.
被害者であり、第一通報者でもあった河野義行さん。一時は警察から犯人のような扱いを受け、マスコミから追われる厳しい日々が続きました。
It was discovered that Kuno had stored a large amount of pesticide in his house, and he was suspected to manufacture sarin and from these pesticides he owned. And not long after, this piece of news was leaked by the local police deliberately. Kuno was immediately dubbed by the media as the poison gas man, causing him to receive intense death threats and legal pressure. It was only until the following year, after discovering that Aum was the mastermind of the attack, Kuno received public apologies from all major news media and the police department.
しかし、事件当夜サリンを浴び、意識不明に陥った奥さんの容体は依然として回復せず。
It was also revealed that Kuno's wife, Sumiko Kuno, was a victim who was put into a coma by the sarin gas. After the attack, she remained unconscious for a whole 14 years.
やはり妻がああいうダメージを受けたということでですね、本当に特に仕事なんかで車一人で運転してますと本当に胸が痛くなるっていうんですか。
Sumiko Kuno eventually passing away in 2008 at the age of 60. Although the police still remain paralyzed, by now more and more people were in open conflict with the cult.
妹と子供をだね、隠してしまったのどこ行ったかわからないんだよ。お父さんテレビ映っちゃうからよ。
Here, an Aum member who kidnapped her father in order to have him sign over the family estate tries to stop him blowing the whistle on the sect. Others, including former members, also began to go public, describing the Aum's methods of extortion.
This was an interview that we have seen previously in the video. It features one of the former cult members named Korea who decided to go public, exposing the cult's methods of exploitation. But you haven't seen her full story yet. After being trapped in a cult with intense brainwashing and exploitation rituals for 10 years, Korea couldn't take it anymore. So she secretly requests Kiyoshi Korea, her 69-year-old brother, who was not in the cult, for help. Although Kiyoshi successfully managed to help her escape from the cult, what Korea didn't know was that this action could pose a huge risk on her brother. On 28th February 1995, her brother Kiyoshi was kidnapped by several senior cult members and taken to a compound in the cult's headquarters, where he was and interrogated for the information of his sister's whereabouts. But in the process of interrogation, Kiyoshi was overdosed and his body was then burned in an incinerator. Among other factors, Kiyoshi's disappearance had finally sparked a major police investigation. But by this time, it would already be too late. Just 3 days before the raid, Asahara was tipped off by his cult members in the Japanese Self-Defense Force. To disrupt the police investigation, Asahara ordered a preemptive strike.
皆さんは必ずやハルマゲドンに巻き込まれることになるだろう。これは避けることができない。さあ、一緒にもうハルマゲドンまで残り少ない時代を全力で救済者として生きようではないか。
And finally, it arrived. Tokyo's subway system was one of the busiest in the world. On a daily average, the system transports 5 million people with very few delays, and that became the perfect place for Aum Shinrikyo to carry out the attack. It was a peaceful Monday morning. Some 9 million commuters were making their way into the center of Tokyo, and no one thinking of what was about to happen. 5 senior cult members were ready to carry out the attack. These members were handpicked by Asahara to make sure their plans were executed seamlessly. A day before, each of them was given bags of liquid sarin that were wrapped in newspapers and an umbrella with a specially sharpened steel tip that can be used to puncture the bags and spread the deadly sarin gas through the trains. Muranoshi Line, the Chiyoda Line, and Hibiya Line. These 3 subway lines were carefully planned with the intention to sidetrack the police. They were expected to converge at the central Kasumi-Kasaki station, where it's close to the Tokyo Police Department and the heart of the Japanese government. If all were to go as planned, the trains would spread the deadly sarin gas as they crossed the busy intersection within a few minutes. At 7:30 in the morning, their plan was set into action. Masato Yokoyama was the first aboard. He boarded the eastbound train on the Marunouchi Line. As the train reached one stop later, Yokoyama began poking 2 sarin bags before getting off. But he was nervous. It's his first time doing this. Eventually, Yokoyama left 1 sarin bag fully intact, only with the other bag punctured once with a small hole, and his train continued on the line. This was a silent attack. The full effects of sarin were not immediate. It wouldn't be noticed until several minutes in. But at this point, none of the passengers nor the subway control centers had any idea of what was happening. At around the same time, Kenichi Hirose ordered the westbound train on the Marunouchi Line. As the train approached 4 stops later, Hirose began puncturing both of his sarin bags. Both bags were successfully broken. Despite this, the train unknowingly continued running. Iko Hayashi boarded the southwestbound train on the Chiyoda Line. After riding the train for 3 stops, Hayashi began puncturing one of his 2 bags of sarin before getting off. The train again unknowingly continued. At around this time, Masato Yokohama's train reached the end of its line. The train was evacuated, but out of surprise, both of its leftover sarin bags were overlooked by all station staff, and so the train began to depart in the opposite direction again. This allowed Yokoyama's sarin to leak into the air continuously and spread over a wider area. Yasuo Hayashi boarded the southwestbound train. Unlike the rest of the attackers, Hayashi carried 3 sarin bags onto the train instead of 2. Prior to the attack, Hayashi was suspected of spying on Asahara, so he had volunteered to carry a floor leftover sarin bag to prove his loyalty to the cult. Riding 2 stops later, Hayashi punctured 2 of his 3 bags before he got off the train. Amongst all attackers, Hayashi made the most punctures. Toru Toyoda boarded its north-eastbound train. Toyoda didn't have second thoughts. When the train reached the next station, he had already punctured both bags and got off. He was on the train for a total of 2 minutes, by far the quickest silent attack out of the 5 attacks that day. But his attack was fatal. By the time the train had reached the next stop, passengers stumbled out, collapsed on the platform. Many had already lost their consciousness.
日比谷線において一連の事案が発生している現在は詳細は不明なるも電車内シンナーあるいはガソリンの匂い等はし病人等が発生している模様であるよってあるいは事案とに発展するやもしれず現時点から警視庁了解特に事案とに関係ないか最優先の調査をどうぞ。
Frightening development this morning. A chemical weapon, nerve gas, was released inside a crowded subway system in Tokyo today.
The Japanese government says this wasn't the work of a lone madman, but an organized attack. Eyewitness reports suggest several people were involved in planting containers filled with poison gas at different underground stations. Some were disguised with masks, others wore sunglasses. But beyond that, officials still don't know who launched this fatal attack or why. Emergency services coped as best as they could. Although crowded, Japan's underground usually works like clockwork. No one was expecting this kind of attack.
Police have reportedly been investigating the cult for several months and are more convinced now than ever that Aum was behind the subway attack.
Within days of Aum's lethal March 1995 attack on the Tokyo subway, the Japanese state finally struck back.
Immediately after the attack, the investigators conducted extensive interviews with subway witnesses, also tracing back to records of previous Aum Shinrikyo involvement in various chemical weapon attacks, and swiftly linked Aum Shinrikyo to the attack. 2 days after the attack, on March 22nd, over 1,000 officers dressed in special chemical warfare suits stormed Aum Shinrikyo's headquarters. During these raids, the police seized over 200 different types of chemicals, explosives, illegal drugs, a safe containing millions of dollars in cash and gold, and numerous torture chambers with some still holding prisoners, most of them who had been part of anti-Aum groups or were connected to an escaped member. Meanwhile, the cult was trying to carry out even more attacks with the purpose to further delay police investigations. On 5th of May, in the men's restroom of Tokyo's Shinjuku station, station staff discovered 2 transparent plastic bags that were spreading unknown films, but the bags were quickly found and seized by the police. After examination, it was revealed that they contained 2 chemicals which could have over 20,000 commuters. On 16th of May, a letter bomb was mailed to the governor of metropolitan Tokyo, and upon opening, the letter exploded, blowing the fingers off the government staff. But after 2 months of conducting multiple intensive raids of Aum Shinrikyo headquarters, the investigation began to show results. On 16th of May, after hiding from the police for around 2 months, Shoko Asahara was finally found and arrested in a compound at one of the cult's headquarters, witnessed by the largest media group in the history of Japan.
Police say they have captured the leader of the Supreme Truth Sect. The arrest of Shoko Asahara came 4 hours after police raided his compound near Mount Fuji.
Trial of the Century was the headline coined by the Japanese media. Asahara was eventually found guilty on 13 of his 17 charges, as police were just uncovering the details of his earlier attacks. On October 30, 1995, the Tokyo Supreme Court ordered Aum Shinrikyo to disband as a religious group, followed by several other countries designating it as a terrorist group, including Russia, Canada, France, European Union. Ultimately, Asahara was sentenced to death by hanging in 2004. In 2018, he was executed along with 12 other senior members of Aum.
Today, the man who founded the group and masterminded the horrific act is executed along with several of his zealots. Has the full story.
Arguably, Aum Shinrikyo had already been brought down, but I don't think the story just ends here. After the Tokyo subway attack in 1995, the cult went underground, and eventually reinvented itself as LF, which continues to follow Asahara's teachings. A smaller group, Hikari Noa, formed in 2007 by Fumihiro Juyu, Aum Shinrikyo's former spokesman and Asahara's successor. Although both groups are now under intense surveillance by the police, they could still operate legally in Japan. They will attract about 100 new followers each year through yoga classes, fortune-telling, and other activities that do not mention Aum Shinrikyo, often targeting young people who do not remember the 1995 subway attack. According to various sources, they now have around 1,500 followers, and that number is still growing slowly. So, will there be a slim chance of history repeating itself? We don't know. All I do know is that Aum Shinrikyo, the deadliest cult in Japan, has left the country with its worst nightmare ever.